Today we're looking at a new tool for Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw called the Rethink Landscape Toolkit from David Kingham. So the Rethink Landscape Toolkit is a 7-step workflow and a set of presets released by David Kingham to help you in Adobe Lightroom or in Adobe Camera Raw. Now, when I talk about it, I'm going to be focused in on Adobe Lightroom because that's what I tend to use for my editing, and that's where it was the most natural fit for these tools. Now, it's important to note, even though this is a collection of presets, these are not one-click presets. So landscape photographers, a lot of times we shy away from presets, and for good reason. It's hard to have one click that magically edits your image into something because the conditions are always varying and you really can't do it. Rather, this is a toolkit which includes 100+ presets that do very specific things. It can very specifically impact contrast, it can impact color, it can help address tones, and it does this through a combination of slider settings and masks, but it's all pre-built for you. So if you want to do something to one particular area, maybe just work on the highlights in this one particular area, a preset is configured to just affect the highlights and maybe bring the exposure down a bit, maybe burn those highlights a little bit. And there's presets in here for that. There's presets for color, there's presets for detail. They're all meant to work as individual tools. It's not a one click and you're done. It's a toolkit to be able to more efficiently repeat your steps and repeat what you're doing on different photos across your portfolio. And not only are there 100+ presets, another very important part of this Rethink Toolkit is that there's a 7-step workflow. It's been broken down into you start with step 1 and you take care of these tasks, and then you do step 2 and take care of these tasks, and so on. And we're going to look at each one of those steps. But what it really brings to the table, and what I find very useful, is that it brings this structure and it makes things so much easier. I consider myself fairly decent at Adobe Lightroom editing, so I'm very familiar with the editing workflow and the process. But I'm also always like bright shiny thing and I get distracted, or I learn a specific technique and I use it all the time and then I get distracted by another technique and I have a hard time putting them all in order or using them consistently. This Rethink Toolkit does a great job of sort of structuring how you would work through an edit of your photo, and I found it super invaluable as I've done so, as well as just the presets themselves being very useful to do things that, and we'll see a few of them in here, where I knew the concept, but frankly I was lazy and didn't do it because I would have to go over here and change all these sliders and then take care of the task and then remove those sliders, set them back so I can move on in my process. With these presets, it makes it super easy to do some of these more advanced techniques more quickly, more efficiently, which makes me more likely to use them. Now, I got access to the toolkit a little over 6 weeks ago, and I actually wrote an F-Stoppers article on it in a written review, but I wanted to follow up and do this video after I'd had more time to use them. And I believe I have used them every single landscape photo edit that I've done since I received them. I've just found them that helpful. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to take a look in Lightroom and we're just going to talk about the workflow, and we're going to just take a look at some of the presets and what they do so you can sort of make sense of what are you talking about workflow and what do you mean 100+ presets that do specific things. It'll start to click after we take this initial overview look. Then we're going to take one of my photos and we're going to work through the whole process. We're going to do the 7 steps. I'm going to show you how you can pick and choose your presets so you can see what options are there, and we're going to start to see how it's able to take a raw file into something that looks much closer to what I saw with my eye. And then I'll share some other before and afters at the end of the video that I've done with this toolkit. Just put the before up on the screen and then the after on the screen, just making sure to see how I've been able to transform some photos from raw to edited with it. Now, one thing to call out, this is not going to be a tutorial video. This isn't going to go over every single preset in the kit. It's not going to talk about everything in super detail and depth. David has put together a wonderful webpage when you buy the presets off of his website, and all these links will be down in the description below. But when you buy the preset, you get access to a webpage that has details on how to use it. And he can talk about the tools in depth much better than I can. I mainly want to provide an overview and how I've been successfully using them with my landscape photography edits. He also has a course that goes with it as well, which I also have had access to and I've found very valuable. And we'll talk a little bit more about the course at the end of the video and where I think it fits in. With that, let's dive into Lightroom and let's take a look at the Rethink Landscape Toolkit. Okay, so we've got Adobe Lightroom open here on my computer, and this is the image that we're going to work on. This is it unedited so far from Death Valley. But before we get into the edits, I want to give an overview of what this toolkit is. Now, David has instructions on how to install these, and when they show up on the left side of Lightroom as presets. And he's done a lot of work to break them out into categories. And I mentioned there's a 7-step workflow, which I found super valuable. And it starts with a core prep, And then you get the style. We'll talk a little bit about what the style is. Then you go into tonal adjustments, color adjustments, detail adjustments, some effects, and then some selections that automate making a selection, but then you can apply what you want to do with it. So maybe you've got a certain area you want to change the exposure on a little bit or add a little more contrast, and it wasn't quite a great fit for one of the presets along the way. You can come in here and there's some pre-built selections that you can make and then make that adjustment from there. Now the workflow has a 7-step process to it, and as Adobe's continued to make Lightroom more powerful, added more AI features into it, AI denoise options, AI remove options, it has started to become a little more important to pay attention to what order you do things in order to keep from having to reapply things and possibly change how the image looked as things underneath other steps are changing. So while this didn't used to be quite as important, it is starting to become more important now, which is why I really like this workflow, because I don't have to remember, I don't have to think every time I open up a photo to do it. I can just come over into the toolkit and it's going to guide me through what I need to do. I think it's easier just to take a look at it and try to overly describe. So let's take a look at step 1. This is Rethink Landscape Core Prep. These are the things you need to follow in order to keep Lightroom from having to rebuild and regenerate everything. Now, another important thing to note with this is not everything is something that you have to do. Some things are just informational. There's not a preset for it. It's just a gentle reminder to go do this now because this is the step you want to do it in, but it's not going to do it for you. A good example of that is right here. You've got remove distractions. You can see it's got a little eye over here for it. And what that means is this is the stage of the editing process you want to remove distractions, but it's not going to do it for you. It doesn't know what you want to remove. It's a reminder that you want to go do that. One thing I liked right off, and I know about import presets, I used to use them, and why I don't use them for landscape photography, I really don't know, but this photo came in before the import presets were applied, before I had them enabled in Lightroom. But what this is, this sort of brings that flat, raw, low contrasty file in with just a default set of edits. And I found it sort of amazing because this photo I had not edited in the past, and because it looked flat. I'm going to reverse that change here. It looked flat. I'm like, doesn't really look super interesting. I just wasn't feeling it. But I applied these import presets, and this is not the edited image, but it just gave me an idea of what potential this file had. So I have since enabled this import setting so that any photo I import, it's applying this to it. As you're going to see, we don't keep that, but I've found it makes it so much easier to call my photos and look at my photos because it's taking it from a bland, raw, low contrasty file that I can't necessarily see where I could take it, and it gives me a head start to go, oh, this has some potential. And that's actually what happened with this photo. I wasn't a super big fan of it, put this import preset on it, and I'm suddenly like, you know, I could work with this photo. It's got potential. So David's instructions tell you how to enable this so it applies. I found it way more valuable than I thought I would and was very happy with that. Now, but like I said, this is just to give you an idea as you're trying to decide what photo do I really want to edit. We actually want to take this, reset it back to default if we're going to work on it. So in this particular case, we're just going to come in here. I click 0 settings and it clears it. Takes me back to the raw file because when I start my edits, I want to work forward from there. So we'll dive in more, but things you're going to do here, HDR merge. So if you're building an HDR file or exposure bracketing or focus stacking or pano, it's got an eye. That means you're going to want to do that at this step, and this isn't going to do it for you. If you're going to do Helicon Focus and take it out there, go ahead and get in Helicon Focus, then bring it back and start using the presets. It's just your reminder that this is the stage to do it. You got your denoise in here, raw details, super resolution. You got your lens corrections. You got some dust spots, and we'll see some of this while I do my file edit. We'll dig into these a little more. Set your white balance. These are all things that you do to sort of prep that core file to get started. And that's what's in step 1. You're sort of setting the stage for the rest of the image. Once you get through that, you're going to come into Style Launch. Style Launch, you need to look at the histogram in the upper right corner, make a determination whether this is a low dynamic range image, a medium dynamic range image, high, or extreme. And then from there, you can use these presets to sort of get you a starting point. It sort of tries to even things out and get you at a good spot where we start to dig into the tools a little more. Again, we'll get into more specifics when we get into editing this actual photo, but for now, think of the style section. It's the second step in the workflow. You're going to get a nice solid base for this image where then you can apply the other more targeted local adjustments. We'll talk about some of those nuances when we get to the edit. So next up, we've got tonal adjustments. And this is where you're going to take care of a lot of the tone things. We're going to take care of the tonal contrast. There's some tools in here to evaluate what the tones look like. We'll look at that in the edit section. We can bring our shadows up a little bit if we want. There's a preset for that. And what happens, you click that preset and it's going to lift the shadows up for you. You can brush in contrast. David has done a really good job at sort of telling you what the options are. So like this lift shadows up here, it's a mask, but it's going to sort of apply to the whole image with the settings that he has set for it. But then there's something like contrast, where maybe I just want to brush some contrast into these mountains back here. Because it's got the brush image next to it, it's going to create a mask. It's going to create a brush mask. So I actually have to go in and brush that in on there. We can do our dodging and burning here. Again, this is one of those things that I know how to dodge and burn through Lightroom, but it's always, you got to go create the brush and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And then if you want to mask it on top of that, you end up with a lot of clicks in Lightroom to do that. This toolkit, this preset, gives me a dodge highlights brush. As we can see, it says dodge highlights. So we're going to make highlights a little brighter. It's a brush, so I'm going to brush those on. If I click this, that lets me dodge the highlights. Maybe I want to bring the shadows up a little bit and I don't want to affect those midtones or the highlights as much. I can dodge shadows and do the same. Same with burn. Bring the highlights down. I can burn the highlights and sort of leave the mids and the shadows alone. Again, you can do all of this without the toolkit, but how easy this makes it to get the brush that's going to do just what you want at the click of a button. It's just really amazing. And we've got certain things that target the sky, because it's using some of Adobe's more advanced selection masks to enable those selections and then make that specific change you want to it. So you can darken the sky at the horizon. You can darken the top of the sky. You can do vignettes. You know, I've talked about a preset for a vignette in the past. It's very similar. We'll see it when we do the edit. So lots of things you can do there, but this section is all focused on tones. You come through and you fix your tones. Next, we get color adjustments. So we go to section 4, we got color adjustments. We got a couple of evaluative tools to help you see the color more clearly in your image. We can play with saturation. We can brush in saturation. This particular one, it's saturation with a brush. So that means I can brush in the saturation. If there's a certain area, maybe there's some leaves I want to bring up or make brighter, or some flowers or something like that, I can get my saturation brush and bring that up. I can apply it more global. I can reset the saturation across the board, do a subtle, moderate, or strong. We got a vibrance. So this vibrance setting, this one is a vibrance mask. It brings up the vibrance in the image, or I can brush my vibrance in. Or if what happens to me a lot is I've brought some saturation up, but I want to desaturate somewhere, I can either do a global, desaturate, oversaturate colors based on a mask that David has created, based on settings he's done to identify those saturated colors and desaturate them a bit. Or I can brush in. Maybe I did some saturation changes and these yellow flowers down here got way too saturated and look a little goofy. I can bring that down. Or maybe the greens and some leaves. I can brush in right where I want to desaturate. And of course, we can play a lot more with some of the blues in the sky. We can do some fall color pop. Greens can be difficult. Here's a preset to get to some natural greens. We got color grading, color dodge. I can add warmth by using this. It's a brush setting. It defaults to being brushing in a little bit of warmth. So I can do that. But all of the presets here are individually used. There's not one you click and image is magically fixed, but they're each individual tools for you to work on your image and take it where you want to go. You still have a ton of control with this. It just makes you more efficient. Moving on to the 5th step of the workflow, we've got detail adjustments. We can reduce noise in the sky. This particular image, as we're going to see, does have a fair amount of noise in the sky. What I was thinking when I shot this, I don't really know. ISO 800, shutter speed of 1/640. I'm not sure what I was doing, but it's got a little bit of noise in it. And if I wanted to just target the noise in the sky, here's a preset for it. Click it, boom. Now we can adjust the strength of it. We'll talk about how these presets, because of how they're built, most often lets you make an adjustment in how strong it is applied. You can make it stronger. You can make it less strong. Super flexible from that. We can brush in where we want the noise to disappear. So maybe it's not just the sky, but you get some other dark shadowy areas that were a little noisy. You can fix it there. Micro contrast to get that detail and those finer points, those smaller detail areas. Clarity and lights, this can work real good on cliff faces and things like that. You can just get a little bit more sharpness, a little bit more detail where those highlights of the rock are. It's been pretty handy. Couple different sharpening options here. Some of them are global, but adjustable, so we can change the strength. And some of it you can brush in. So if you've got some rocks, you want to put some sharpness in, super easy. You click sharpness and you can brush in the sharpness. So those are your detail adjustments. It takes us to effects. we can add light. These are just special effects. These are things we could be brushing in. We could be adding in light through a brush. We can do a light bleed, which I've actually come to like. We'll see that when I do my edit. We can do sunbeams. We can do painting options. We can brush in things. Atmospheric perspective. So we're trying to get that depth or that perspective in a scene. We've got a setting that we can use to try to pull that off. Misty morning fog. We can add a warm glow to images. We got the Orton effect. I'm a big Orton effect. I photograph a lot of waterfalls, and I'm a sucker for my Orton effect. And I've got a couple different ways I can bring it in. I can retain the details. I can do some sky, the general overall Orton effect of the whole image. And again, in each case, I can change the strength of the Orton effect by moving a slider. Change the sky, we can make different sky, change the sky glow, but essentially this is your special effects piece in part, just to add this little bit of extra stylistic details to it. And then finally, talked about the selections. I mentioned that at the beginning. The selections aspect is maybe there's something you want to do and there's not a pre-built preset, but I know I want to target the lights. I see the lights and maybe I want to make them just a touch brighter but not impact the mids. So I can come in here, select the lights, and it's going to create a mask. It just affects the brighter parts of the image, and I can make my changes. Maybe it's making them a touch brighter, maybe it's bring them down a little bit. You can do anything like that. I can target my sky horizon, background, water, mountains, vegetation, and some of this is just capitalizing on some of the new automated features Adobe Lightroom's been bringing, but it just gives me a quick preset to get to it. But again, it really just sort of talks to the flexibility of this toolkit, that it's not coming to you for that one-click preset. It's bringing you a workflow and an individual tools to help you take the image where you want it to go in a very efficient and easy manner. So that's an overview of the presets. Essentially, it is a 7-step workflow, so you can continue to do a repeatable series of steps to edit your images. There's so much to remember when editing photos. Having it laid out in a sequential process is super handy. And hopefully you've picked up these presets are not one click. They are for individual tools. And as you're going to see, you don't have to use every single preset. You may go through one section and not want to make a whole lot of changes. In another section, you may use more, and you're going to see that when I work through the edit on this photo. I am not going to touch every single preset that's in here. That would be silly. I don't need every single preset. Some areas I might use more, some areas I might use less, but you get to pick and choose. It's literally, as David calls it, a toolkit. It's a set of presets to help you edit your images. So let's go ahead and get started on editing this photo. Okay, now let's edit this image in Lightroom. So like I said, this is an image from Death Valley. I think it was my 2023 trip to Death Valley. And like I said, initially I wasn't super impressed by it, but when I was playing with this toolkit and I happened to apply an import preset to it, I was like, you know, this thing has its potential. And that's when I decided to edit it. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to go through here and we're going to edit. We're going to follow each of the steps and we're going to do the edit on this photo. Like I said, import settings, that's what got me sort of interested in this photo when I was working to play with the toolkit. And it's pretty cool. I was like, hey, I've got some potential here. I've got some light playing around here with the sun coming down. I've got some shadows in here and the clouds are looking pretty cool. So that's what got me interested in trying to edit this photo. But this is just to get you an idea to help you when you're calling your images. We actually are going to zero those settings out because the way this works is we want to start with the raw file and build upon it. First thing we're going to do is we do want to take care of these things like I mentioned earlier. If it's got an eye icon, that's just informational. That means it's a reminder. It's like if you've got an HDR merge to do, if you've got a pano, if you've got a focus stack, this is the time to do it. I don't have any of those going on in this particular one. Now I do have denoise, and I mentioned before, I got some noise here and these clouds here. You can see it. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure what I was thinking shooting at ISO 800 when my shutter speed was 1/640th of a second. I could have slowed that down a reasonable amount and still been okay. So I probably could have shot this at ISO 400. Even handheld with my shaky hands have been okay. But either way, we've got some noise here. We're going to go ahead and fix it. According to the workflow, I should get this fixed. This one does actually work. When I click on it, it's going to denoise the photo. It's going to pop up. And it's going to apply a denoise to it. Now I mentioned along the way that you can change how much effect this has by using the sliders. You've either got the preset sliders on the left, which work sometimes, or you've got the sliders over on the right. And it tells you, David tells you when you can usually adjust it. You've got the little slider right there. That means there's adjustments you can make. And it even tells you in the details panel. So it tells you where to go to play with this. So let's set this to 200%. That definitely cleaned it up a fair amount. But let's just go take a look. We see here in the detail, I can change how much it works. It's 50 right now. I could change that down a little bit. For sake of this, we'll just kick it down to 40. And we'll call it that. And I've denoised this photo. So we move through raw details, super resolution, remove distractions. Again, this is an I for informational. It doesn't do anything when I click remove, but it's my reminder that if I wanted to remove something, I can come over here and click remove. In this photo, there's nothing I'm going to remove. I'm not too worried about it. Now the next tool, next step, we want to look for dust spots. People forget to do this all the time. How many times have you seen an image get posted and you left a dust spot in there? I've done it, that's for sure. But in this step, this sequential flow, in this core step, I can visualize dust spots, and this is great. Now, Lightroom has a visualize dust spots option. I've done a video on it before, but this is another way to do it where you can really pick out the dust spots. Now, this particular one, actually, there might be a little bit of one up there. So I can do a heel, and we'll fix that right up. I don't see any other dust spots. That fixed that. And then I can just turn that down, turn it off, and I essentially have fixed my dust spots. I can also come over here and just visualize spots, and I can delete the mask. I can do either one. So I can delete visualize spots, but my heel is still fixed. So again, right there, that was one where I initially didn't think I had a dust spot, but by using that tool, one, it reminded me to check, and two, it let me find it. So moving on down, we can balance sky and land. Sort of evens things out a little more. I'm not going to use it for this photo because what I like is it sort of pulls this in. So I'm just going to Command Z to back that change back off. Again, you don't have to do every single thing, but this is a reminder that if you want to do it, this is a good time to do it. I do want to apply my lens corrections. Non-Sony is what I'm doing because I shot this on an Nikon. Evaluate composition shapes. Maybe you're interested to see compositionally, what do you have here? What are the shapes? And obviously this one's fairly easy. We got the big mountains and we got the sky and we got the land in the front. And so we're sort of weighted off to the right for this image, which I know, and I'm sort of hoping, and my hope is I'll balance it with the light. So we'll have the dark and then the light, and that's where I hope my balance comes from. But it can be a useful tool, and it just sort of abstracts it so you can look at it abstractly. There's a couple other tools that do that as well. Set white balance. So this is always a good one. This is another one I knew about. I'd heard about people setting the white balance because I actually have a hard time setting white balance well. I tend to go a little too warm. Probably end up going a little too warm on this photo too, just because it's what I tend to do. You can come in here, and now I can come in here and I can see I've got my little yellows. I've got my cool shadows. Again, I like things a little on the warm side, so I'm probably going to warm this up just a tiny bit. Warm this up. Just so I got a little bit of warmth hitting on these rocks too, and here in the foreground, and then my cool shadows stay here. But it's just a cool little tool to help you refine that. And then you can work on your tint here as well. A little too green there. I really think the default 12 is right there. But again, just a tool to help you with white balance. If you don't feel like you need this tool to help, then you don't need to use it. But I found it very useful, especially for my white balance eye. Then once you're done, obviously this is not the photo we want. This is where we can use the preset slider, set it to 0, and I've taken my image back to without that effect applied, but my white balance settings are retained. And that's my core file. I've got my base plate, and then we're going to jump into the styles. Now, we talked about it before when I was doing the tool overview. To figure this one out, what you want to do is you want to look at your histogram and determine, is this a low dynamic range to a high dynamic range image? Where does it fall? Once you decide that, then you decide, what do you want to start from? Do you want to start low contrast, medium contrast, and so on? So this is, I would say, on the high side. You know, here's our histogram up here on the right. That's how I'm determining it. I would say this is sort of a high dynamic range. So I'm going to come on down here, and I can select these. So I'm in the high dynamic range. I can do low contrast, medium contrast, high contrast, or you can do adaptive. This is the one where Adobe tries to make some decisions for you and tries to bring it in. I feel like I've had more success with choosing a specific one. Now you may notice I'm hovering over these, and by default Lightroom will show you the preview over here in the main screen. But for some performance issues I'll touch on at the end of the video, I've disabled that ability, and so I have to look at the navigator up here. So if you wonder what I'm hovering over, I'm looking at the navigator image up here to see sort of a preview of what the image does. I think I'm going to go high DR, medium contrast. And what this means is it's giving me my base image that we're going to do the rest of my edits from. This is giving me my foundation. Actually, I'm going to try high contrast. So I actually like high contrast better. So I'm going to stick with the high contrast. Now, You notice this has a plus or minus over here. There are some settings that David says you should do because these can't, just like you can't apply a one-click preset to everything, this style is as close as we get to a one-click preset, and it's just not going to work the same for every single image. If this was a much brighter image, it wouldn't work the same. So once you choose the one you want, this is the time to come over to your tone panel in Lightroom and make some global adjustments. For example, make this just a little bit brighter, so I'm going to bring the exposure up just a little bit. I can play with the shadows and the highlights, and I can even work with my tone curve. You can do some of those adjustments just to sort of tweak it right where you want. Don't take high DR, high contrast, and be one click done. I'm going to go work on my targeted adjustments. What you want to do is you make it, do some additional global changes here. I'm going to leave it at this for the sake of this demo so it doesn't get too long. So that gives me my base style. This is what I'm going to be working from. And what I'm going to be trying to do just from here is I'm going to be trying to make this bright, trying to emphasize this light coming down, and just try to bring a little bit more dynamicness to this image. But I don't want to do it in a global way because that would apply to the whole image. I want to do it through some of these targeted adjustments. Now, like I said, we can evaluate composition tones, you know, light, dark. This, maybe I'll come a little darker, keep this bright because that's what I'm sort of trying to go for. I'm going to Command Z out of there. I'm going to bring in some midtone contrast. There's a little slider here, so I can change it if I want to, and you do that underneath the mask panel. So I can come over to the mask panel, highlight the midtone contrast, and then I can change how much amount. Defaults to 100. I could increase it, or I could decrease it. I'm going to stick with the 100 that it came in as, but you can make those changes to it. And I am going to go ahead and burn some shadows just to sort of show you how this works over in this way, just to try to make it just a little darker over there. So we're going to burn shadows. Now, what this has done is it's applied a mask, and it tells me it's a brush. So it didn't apply it to the whole thing. I have to brush this effect in. So I come over here to burn shadows and I click on the mask, and you'll see down here just below there's this paintbrush, brush to darken shadows. So when I click that, it gives me my brush, and I can come over here and just sort of darken this in. I'm actually going to darken these guys back here. Again, I'm trying to get those layers just to pop a little bit more. So I'm going to burn in those shadows like that. And if I decide that was too much or not enough, or I want a little more, I can crank those up, bring them down. I can change the preset on it. But like I said, you can do the same for the highlights. So say we want to dodge the highlights. Then I click on dodge highlights, click on the lighten, brush to lighten highlights. I can come down here and I can change my flow. I can adjust my brush before I do any of this. So I'm going to bring the flow way down. I don't want a big, huge hit here. And then we're just going to just put a little bit more highlights in through there. So again, we could work on this photo for a long time. I'm just trying to show what you can do. And these ones with the brush, it's going to create a mask. Then you go over to the masks panel and you find the spot that says brush to lighten highlights in this case. And then I get a brush that I can brush those in. I could add contrast to the sky. We're going to go ahead and try that. This is just going to be a mask. It's going to make a sky selection and add contrast to the sky. So as you can see, we've added contrast. And it makes that sky, just gives it that extra little punch up there. And I've talked about vignettes, and I've shown this before, but we can get a vignette here. This is the vignette mask. It's right here. As you can see, if I double click on this, that gives me my vignette radial gradient. I can expand it just a little bit. And then again, come back in here. If I think it was too much, I can bring it down just a little bit more if I thought it was too vignetted, and I can change the amount. If I think it should be more, I can crank it up and make it look something like that. I'm going to actually reduce it just a little bit. I just wanted a teeny tiny hint, and I'm able to add a vignette. Again, this is all just done through the presets. So we're going to call that good for here. It's got several other presets you could use. Color adjustments, we'll come in here. We can evaluate composition colors. This is sort of a moodier, less colorful image, but this, again, it blurs it and abstracts it. So you can focus on the colors. Could be more important if you're trying to balance colors of a lot of wildflowers or anything like that for the scene. But it's just a handy little tool to help you evaluate your image and see where you want to go with it. I am going to bring the vibrance up. Not really going to play with saturation here. I don't think it's necessarily needed. I can give it a little bit of subtle warmth. I'm going to come down here, and this preset will give a mask that just gives it a little bit of warmth. Now that made it a little too warm because I start to lose some of this coolness down here. So I can come up here, choose my subtle warmth. I could remove the effect from certain areas. So this is an important note. Say I don't want that warmth in these mountains. I can come in here, click here. It's going to give me a brush, and I can remove that effect from some of these areas. So where's that darker, cooler shadow, and I don't want that effect, I'd rather it be in this where the sunlight's coming down, I can fix that. And if I think it's still a little too much overall, I can bring the amount down a little bit and get what I want. So again, it's like this through all the presets. Just look for the little icons. It's going to tell you the little circle means it's a mask. It means it's creating a mask that's going to do that effect. A lot of times there's an additional way in there to remove it. Makes it super easy to remove it from areas you don't want to apply it to if it was a mask applying to the whole image. And you can add and remove. It's pretty cool that way. When it's a brush, that means you're going to be able to brush in the effect. So I think that's pretty good for here. Obviously a lot more you could do with it. Then we get down to the detail adjustments. Let's just play with micro contrast. I think I liked what that did. If you could see, it brought a little bit more detail into these edges and pieces and parts. So I think I like that. We're gonna stick with that. We can just do sharpening overall. We're gonna do a sharpening artifact free. This tells me I can adjust it. So we are going to adjust it. Don't wanna over sharpen it. So we're gonna bring that back a little bit. And that's it. Those are the details. We can do more. We could play more with the shadows. If I was a little worried about shadow noise, I could fix shadow noise. I could brush in where I want to reduce noise. The amount of denoise can be increased or decreased. Finally, takes us to landscape effects. So we can add light, we could brush in light, we could do light bleeds and all sorts of stuff. I will do a light bleed here. Of course, that's big and gaudy and bright, but if I come in here, it tells me I can adjust it, tells me the things I can do with it. I come in, I am going to move and resize. So I click that and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to bring it in like this. I'm trying to just get it to sort of hit in this centerish part. Move it over here a little bit. That's way too intense. I'm trying to mimic just sort of the sun coming down and coming down through there. I'm just trying to emphasize that a little bit more through this, but that's a little too bright, right? So I can come down here to the amount slider, bring it back down to around 40. And then let's see, here it is on, off, on, probably even still a little bit too much. So we're gonna bring it down a little more. Turn off, on, there we go. And we'll leave it like that. That was just sort of show sun coming down through the clouds real quickly. But that really takes this image to just about where I want it. If I look at the before, you can see flat, not a lot going on. And then when I do my edits, I sort of start to get what I want. There's probably some cropping that could be done here and a couple other little things to clean up on here. But I think that gives you an overview of the key points to take away from here, which is the Rethink Landscape Toolkit gives you a structured workflow with a wide array of presets to use as individual tools to shape and mold your photo into what you remember seeing when you're out in the field. So I'm going to show you a couple more images that I've edited. I'm going to show you the before image and then the after image. We'll sort of cycle through those, but stay tuned. I'll give you my thoughts on the Rethink Landscape Toolkit from David Kingham. So my overall thoughts on the Rethink Landscape Toolkit. It's probably pretty obvious based on the video, but I've been very impressed with this toolkit. As someone that feels like I had a pretty decent understanding of Adobe Lightroom, how to make things do what they want to do, global adjustments versus targeted adjustments, local adjustments, and understanding how lots of tools and pieces and parts go together, I really feel like this toolkit has been immensely valuable to me. First, just the structured workflow. There are so many steps I tend to forget, like we talked dust spots. I get those out there and forget to clean up the dust spots. The structured approach, it's a mental reminder. I don't have to do every single one. Maybe there's certain sections I barely touch, and that's okay if that's part of your editing workflow. But just the simple act of going through a step-by-step process on every image just makes things so much, more efficient to me. Makes it less likely I'm going to forget, which will ultimately pay off in more consistent editing style, which I think is great. The presets themselves, I love that it's a tool-like approach because I can pick and choose what tools I want to use. And there's several tools in there. That white balance trick. That white balance trick is probably a really good way for me to start setting white balance because I can see it and understand it better than just doing it without that tool. But remembering to go in and make all those slider adjustments to do it on my normal course of action, no, I just didn't do it. But when it's a click and I've got what I want, it works really well for that. So I found the presets super valuable. The dodging, burning, the ability to dodge in all shades or just dodge highlights or just dodge midtones or shadows, that's great. Same with the burn. All of those little tools to help me fine point, fine tune what I want to do easily. Pretty much at a click of a button, I've got a brush or tool that's going to let me do what I want to get done. Just makes me more efficient. So I'm very happy with that. Again, as you saw, these are not one-click presets. Even that style preset is just setting the global. Think of it as getting the global image prepped, and then you can go in with those more targeted tools to make the adjustments that you want to make. But it makes it nice, fast, and easy. So yeah, I'm super impressed with the toolkit. Like I said, I got it a little over 6 weeks ago, and it has become a regular part of my workflow when I'm editing landscape photography images. Couple things to be aware of. 2 things to be aware of. 1, I touched on it in there. Lightroom by default will apply the preset to the image in the main thing. As you are scrolling through that list or clicking around, Lightroom can start to get a little slow, a little bogged down. And it's because it's trying to apply these presets, some of which are rather complicated masks. So it starts to try to build the mask, apply the preset, and then you've already moved on to the next one, so it starts to try to do it again. So it can become a little problematic. David's updated it, the information on his fact to mention doing what I'm going to suggest doing, which is disable that. I'll put a screenshot here where it's at. It's in Lightroom preferences. You can turn off the preview. You can still see the preview in the navigator pane. It's a much smaller preview, but it gives you a general idea of whether it's worth clicking on it. And to me, the performance trade-off was well worth it. I can scroll through those very quickly, get a rough idea of how it's going to apply in the navigator little image up there, and then go from there. So definitely, in my opinion, helped the presets move a little snappier. That was the only real performance problem I had. I am running this on a MacBook Pro. It is an M1 processor. So it's getting old by, I guess, today's standards, even though it still works great, and it had no problems with Lightroom or these presets on it once I took care of that. The other caution, and I didn't really call it out in the edits, but say you're dodging highlights and you're dodging and you go on a few more steps and you're like, oh, I want to dodge highlights over here. If you forget that you've already dodged highlights and click it again, it'll sort of do a reset. So you got to keep that in mind. If you're going to go re-dodge highlights, you want to go find it in the mask panel again where you did it initially. Select it and then go brush it in another place. Most times when I've accidentally clicked it, I've gone, whoops, I've already clicked this. I need to go find it, not start a new one. And I can just Command Z my way back out of it and fix it. But just something to be a little cautious of. It really wasn't a big deal, but it is something to be semi-aware of as you do it. Finally, I said I'd talk about the course because I do also have access to the course. And the presets by themselves are $39, super affordable. I highly recommend picking up the presets. It'll change the way you edit in Adobe Lightroom. When you get the presets, you do get access to the web pages that have text-based and very informative how-to, what they're doing, walks you through the steps, talks a little bit about the tools. It was very informative, and really, for me, it could have been enough because I understand how the tools work and I understand a lot of the concepts, just trying to piece them all together. But with that said, the course, which comes with the presets, is $197. And if you are new to Adobe Lightroom or feel like you're really struggling with your landscape photography editing, or even if you're sort of like to the spot where I'm at, where you've got the pieces and parts, but you still struggle really to put them together in a consistent manner, I do recommend the course. I'm not completely through the course, but David really goes in depth on what the tools are, how to use them, and he talks about his editing philosophy as well, which I think is really important because it sort of tells you where he's coming from, why we're doing these style adjustments, where he's trying to take an image, and then how he takes the image even further beyond. The course also has several videos of him editing photos and working through it as well, which is super useful to see his approach. Like I said, my video here is not a tutorial. It's really just an overview of the tools, how I've used them, and a little bit of my feedback and review on them. It goes way more in depth. So I really do feel like even if you understand Lightroom tools but struggling or not happy with your edits, this might be worth investing in the course. If you're new to editing in Lightroom and new to these concepts in general, the course is probably worthwhile. So do keep that in mind if you're getting it. It's $197, you get the course and the presets. But if you just want the presets and you feel like you're pretty good, you just really want those tools, you really can't beat $39 for the presets. I think you'll save that amount of time in no time at all. Love the presets. They've become a regular part of my landscape photography editing workflow. I think David Kingham has done a great job with these presets. He does have an active community. I forgot to mention that. When you buy the presets, you get access to the community where there's question and answers. So far, I've seen he's been very responsive. So a great set of tools. I'm really happy to have found it. I'm really hoping it's actually going to help my editing workflow quite a bit. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, mini gear reviews, and talk about software like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.